I didn't expect the argument to happen in the cereal aisle. One minute I was staring at two nearly identical boxes of granola, pretending to compare sugar content. The next, Owen was standing beside me, arms crossed, jaw tight, looking like he'd been holding something in all morning and finally decided to let it spill, right there between oats and almond milk. "So what are we?" he asked quietly. Not angry, not loud, just tired. And that somehow made it worse. We'd been seeing each other for almost 4 months. That's not nothing. It's not forever, sure. But it's also not just a fling you forget about once the season changes. We had routines. He slept over most weekends. I kept a toothbrush for him in my bathroom without ever officially talking about it. He knew how I took my coffee. I knew which songs he skipped every time they came on. But labels? That was where everything got complicated. "I don't know," I said, which was the wrong answer. I knew it the second it left my mouth. Owen let out a slow breath and turned his attention to a shelf, like he was suddenly fascinated by dried fruit. "You don't know," he repeated. "After 4 months. I just don't think we need to define it," I said. "Can't we just be what we are?" He finally looked at me then. Really looked at me. His eyes weren't sharp or accusing. They were searching. Like he was trying to figure out whether I was scared, selfish, or just oblivious. "That works for you," he said. "It doesn't work for me." That was Owen in a nutshell. Calm. Direct. No drama, no raised voice. He didn't storm out of places or slam doors. He just stated things plainly and expected honesty in return. And honesty had never been my strong suit when it came to this stuff. We met at a friend's birthday party back in early spring. I almost didn't go. One of those things you consider canceling until guilt wins. Owen was there with a guy the first assumed was his boyfriend. Turns out, it was just his roommate. We spent most of the night talking on the balcony, shouting over music, trading half-finished stories, and laughing like we'd known each other longer than a couple of hours. He asked for my number before I left, not in a smooth way, more like, "Hey, I don't want this to end just because the party's over." I liked that. I liked him. What I didn't like was the quiet pressure that started building after a while. Not from him, exactly, from the idea of what things were becoming. Because Owen knew who he was. He didn't hesitate when he talked about his past relationships. He didn't dodge questions about the future. He was out, open, and comfortable saying things like boyfriend without flinching. Me? I'd spent years avoiding definitions. Not because I was closeted. My friends knew, my family knew, but because labels felt like promises. And promises felt like traps. I'd been the guy who rushed in before, who named things too quickly, built castles in his head, then watched them collapse. After that, I learned to keep things flexible, undefined, safe. But safe for me didn't mean safe for Owen. We finished grocery shopping in silence, the kind that presses against your ears. At the checkout, the cashier asked if we were together or separate, and Owen paused just long enough to hurt before saying, "Separate." The word stung more than it should have. Back at my apartment, he set the bags down and leaned against the counter. "I'm not asking for marriage," he said. "I'm asking for clarity." I nodded, even though my chest felt tight. "I know. Do you?" His voice softened. "Because sometimes it feels like you want all the benefits of being with me without actually choosing me." That landed hard. I didn't argue. I didn't joke my way out of it. I just stood there, realizing that avoiding labels didn't mean avoiding consequences. It just meant letting someone else carry the uncertainty for both of us. And for the first time since we met, I wondered if my fear of defining things was about freedom or about losing him. Owen didn't stay the night. That alone should have told me how serious things were. Usually, after any kind of tension, we defaulted to familiarity. Netflix half-watched, his leg thrown over mine, silence smoothing things out without actually fixing them. But this time, after that conversation in my kitchen, He grabbed his jacket and said, "I need some space to think." He didn't say it dramatically. He didn't make it sound like a threat, just a fact. I nodded like I understood. Like I was fine with it. The door clicked shut behind him, and my apartment felt instantly too quiet. I spent the rest of the night pacing, checking my phone, not checking my phone, replaying everything he'd said, especially the part about choosing. That word stuck with me, because the uncomfortable truth was, I hadn't chosen him. Not fully. I'd let things happen, let him show up, let him care. But I'd kept one foot out the door the entire time, just in case. The next morning, I woke up to a text. "Owen, I'm not mad. I just need to know if we're moving forward or standing still." No emojis. No softness. Just honesty. I stared at the message for a long time. Typed something. Deleted it. Typed something else. What I wanted to say was, "I'm scared." What I actually sent was, "Can we talk later?" He replied almost immediately, "Yeah." Tonight? I spent the day distracted, barely present at work, my thoughts looping. Every relationship I'd had followed the same pattern. Intensity, comfort, then my slow retreat once things got real. I told myself it was about independence, about not needing definitions. But if I was being honest, it was about control. If I never named something, I could never be fully blamed when it ended. Owen came over that evening around 7. He looked tired, but composed. That was another thing about him. He didn't use chaos to communicate. He sat on the couch, hands folded like he was ready for whatever answer I gave him. "I don't want to pressure you," he said. "But I can't stand something that makes me feel optional." That word again. Optional. I swallowed. "You're not." "But it feels that way," he said. "Like you enjoy me being here, but you don't want to say what it means." I stared at the floor. What if saying it changes things? "It already has," he replied gently. Silence stretched between us. "I've been hurt before," I finally said. It felt inadequate, but it was the truth. Every time I put a name on something, I build expectations. And when it falls apart, it wrecks me. Owen nodded slowly. "I get that. Truly. But avoiding expectations doesn't stop pain. It just delays it, and usually shifts it onto the other person." That hit hard, because it was true. He leaned forward slightly. "I'm not asking you to define yourself in some perfect way. I'm asking if you want to be with me. If you're willing to stand in that, even if it's uncomfortable." I looked at him then. Really looked. The way his shoulders were tense, like he was bracing himself. The way his eyes searched my face, not for the right answer, but for an honest one. And that was the moment I realized something. My fear wasn't bigger than my feelings. I'd just been letting it drive. "I don't have everything figured out," I said. "I don't know what labels always mean to me. But I know I don't want to lose you because I was too afraid to say yes to something real." He didn't smile right away. He just breathed out, like he'd been holding that breath for weeks. "So what does that yes look like?" he asked. I hesitated, then said it. "It looks like trying, like calling this a relationship, like being your boyfriend, even if it scares me." His expression softened, something warm breaking through the tension. "I'm okay with scared," he said, "as long as we're honest." We sat there for a moment before he reached for my hand. The contact felt different this time, less tentative, more grounded. Love without labels had felt safe. But sitting there with him, choosing clarity over comfort, I realized something else. Sometimes, naming what you have isn't about trapping yourself, it's about showing someone they matter enough to stay. Calling him my boyfriend didn't magically fix everything. I wish it did. I really do. The first few weeks after that conversation felt good, solid, like we'd stepped onto firmer ground. Owen introduced me as his boyfriend to friends without hesitation, his hand always finding the small of my back when he did it. I noticed it every time, noticed how natural it felt, noticed how part of me still flinched. Not because I didn't want him, because being seen like that, clearly, unmistakably, was new. I didn't tell him that part right away. Instead, I leaned into the routine. Dinners together on weeknights. Grocery shopping that didn't end in arguments. Lazy Sundays where we barely left the couch. On the surface, it probably looked like we'd solved the problem. But internally, I was adjusting to a version of myself that didn't have an exit sign glowing above his head. One night, about a month in, we were lying in bed together, the room still warm and quiet. Owen traced absent-minded circles on my chest, his breathing slow. "Can I ask you something without you shutting down?" he said. I smiled faintly. "That depends on the question." He rolled his eyes. "Fair, but seriously." I nodded. "Okay. Do you feel different now that we're defined?" he asked. There it was. I stared at the ceiling for a second too long. I felt his hand still, like he was listening with his whole body. "Yes," I said finally. "And no." He waited. "I feel closer to you," I continued, "more grounded. But I also feel more exposed, like there's more to lose." Owen shifted onto his side, propping his head on his hand so he could look at me. "That makes sense." "It does?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah," he said. "Being clear isn't safer. It's braver." That word again. Braver. I turned to face him. "Does it ever scare you, being this open?" He smiled softly. "All the time. I just decided a while ago that fear wasn't a good enough reason to stay half present." That stuck with me. Because half present was exactly how I'd lived for years. In relationships, friendships, even work. Always holding something back so I could retreat intact if things went wrong. But lying there with Owen, his leg tangled with mine, I realized something uncomfortable. Clarity wasn't the thing making me anxious. Commitment was. Not in the dramatic, forever sense, but in the day-to-day choice of showing up honestly, even when it would be easier to pull away. A few days later, I tested myself without meaning to. A coworker asked casually if I was seeing anyone. Normally, I'd shrug it off, give a vague answer. But this time, I heard myself say, "Yeah, I have a boyfriend." The word landed differently out loud. Real. Public. When I told Owen later that night, he smiled like I'd given him a gift. "How did it feel?" I thought about it. "Terrifying," I said. "But good." He leaned in and kissed me, slow and unhurried. That's kind of my favorite combination. We still didn't agree on everything. There were moments I needed space, and moments he needed reassurance. We talked more than I was used to, about expectations, about boundaries, about what labels meant to us, not just in theory, but in practice. And slowly, something shifted. I stopped thinking of labels as cages. I started seeing them as signals that said, "I'm here, I'm choosing this. I'm not disappearing when it gets hard." Love without labels had protected me once, but love with clarity, that was teaching me how to stay. The first real crack didn't come from something big, it came from a party. Owen invited me to his friend Maya's place, a cramped apartment, too many people, music just loud enough to make conversation slightly annoying. Normally, I'd find a corner, nurse a drink, wait it out. But Owen was in his element, laughing, moving easily from group to group, introducing me without hesitation. "This is my boyfriend," he said more than once. Every time I smiled, every time my chest tightened just a little. Halfway through the night, I escaped onto the balcony to get some air. The city buzzed below, that familiar hum that usually calmed me. I was scrolling my phone when Owen stepped out, closing the door softly behind him. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said too quickly. Just needed a breather. He leaned against the railing beside me. "You've been quiet," I shrugged. "Just tired." He studied me for a second, then nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully buy it. Owen had a way of clocking things without pushing. It was comforting, and sometimes infuriating. Later that night, back at his place, it finally spilled. "I feel like I'm performing," I said, sitting on the edge of his bed, shoes still on. Performing what? He asked gently. Being someone who has all this figured out, I said. Someone who's totally comfortable being seen as half of a unit. Owen sat beside me. I don't need you to have it figured out. I know, I said. But sometimes it feels like you do. He frowned slightly. That's not fair. I'm not saying you're asking for it, I replied. I'm saying I feel like I'm catching up to where you already are. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I forget sometimes that clarity isn't universal. That surprised me. What do you mean? I've had years to get used to choosing people out loud, he said. To saying, this is who I'm with, and letting that be known. I don't think about how that might feel like pressure to someone else. Relief washed over me, not because the problem disappeared, but because he saw it. I don't want to go backwards, I said. I just don't want to feel like I'm failing at this. You're not, he said firmly. You're just learning a different way of being in it. We lay down after that, tangled together, the conversation settling into something quieter. But it lingered with me over the next few weeks, because here was the truth I didn't want to admit. Clarity had brought up parts of me I'd been avoiding. Insecurities. Old habits. The instinct to pull away the moment I felt overwhelmed. And then life tested us. Owen got offered a job in another city. Nothing dramatic. Just an opportunity, one he hadn't even applied for. A former colleague recommended him. Better pay. Bigger role, he told me on a Tuesday night, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. It's not a yes, he said quickly. Not without talking to you. My stomach dropped anyway. How far? I asked. 3 hours, he said. Same time zone, not another country or anything. Still, the word distance echoed in my head. I nodded slowly. Okay. But inside, something old stirred. The familiar urge to detach before things got complicated. To say maybe this is a sign and step back before it hurt. Owen watched my face carefully. You don't have to decide anything right now. I know, I said, and I meant it. That night, alone in my apartment, I realized something unsettling. Love without labels had let me walk away cleanly before. Love with clarity meant staying present even when uncertainty showed up wearing a new face. And the question wasn't whether I was afraid of the distance. It was whether I was willing to choose him again, this time without the comfort of pretending it was casual. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain ran the same loop. Owen in a new city, new apartment, new routines that didn't automatically include me. Not because he wanted distance, but because distance would exist whether I liked it or not. In the past, this was where I'd quietly start pulling away. Not dramatically, just less responsive, less available, letting things thin out naturally so the ending didn't feel like a rupture. But I didn't want to do that again. The next evening, Owen came over with takeout and that careful energy people have when they know a hard conversation is coming. We ate on the couch, TV on but muted, neither of us really tasting the food. I've been thinking, he said eventually. Me too, I replied. He smiled faintly. Of course you have. He took a breath. I don't want you to feel like you're being dragged into something. If this job happens, I want it to be a conversation, not a wedge. I know, I said, and I don't want you turning it down just because you're worried about me. He looked at me, eyebrows raised slightly. That's new, I laughed, a little nervously. Yeah, growth, apparently. We sat in silence for a moment before I said the thing I'd been afraid to say out loud. I'm scared I'll disappear, I admitted. Not that you'll forget me, but that distance will make it easier for me to retreat. Old habits. Owen didn't flinch. Thank you for saying that. I don't want to be that guy, I continued, the one who says all the right things but checks out the moment it gets hard. He reached for my hand. Then don't be. Stay, even when it's uncomfortable. That was the through line with him. Stay, not promise forever, not have all the answers, just stay present. A week later, he accepted the job. It was strange how calm I felt once the decision was made, like the uncertainty had been worse than the outcome. We talked logistics, visits, phone calls, what we needed from each other to make it work without pretending it wouldn't be challenging. I need reassurance, he said one night. Not constantly, just honesty when you're struggling. I can do that, I said. And this time I didn't say it lightly. In return, I asked for space to process without him assuming the worst. Without every quiet moment meaning I was halfway out the door. I can do that too, he said. The night before he moved, we lay in bed, legs tangled, neither of us wanting to say goodbye because it felt too final. This would have been easier before, I said quietly. He hummed. Before what? Before we named things, I said. I could have told myself it didn't really count. He turned toward me. And now? Now it counts, I said, which is why it hurts. But also why it matters. He kissed me then. Slow, intentional, like he was memorizing the moment instead of clinging to it. After he left, the apartment felt emptier than I expected. Not just physically, emotionally. There was no pretending anymore. No ambiguity to soften the absence. And weirdly, that felt honest. We texted every day, called most nights. Some conversations were light, some were hard. There were moments I felt the familiar urge to pull back. But this time I named it. Said, "Hey, I'm spiraling a little." And he met me there instead of guessing. Distance didn't make things easier, but clarity made them possible. And for the first time, I understood something I'd always avoided. Labels don't create closeness. They reveal whether you're willing to maintain it. Love without labels had protected me from pain. Love with clarity taught me how to sit with it, and still choose someone anyway. Long distance has a way of exaggerating everything. Good days felt brighter. Little wins stretched into something celebratory. Bad days felt heavier, like there was no easy way to reach across the space and fix them. Every silence carried weight. Every missed call felt louder than it should have. I learned quickly that distance didn't test attraction. It tested habits. I caught myself doing it one Thursday night, hovering over my phone, reading Owen's last message for the third time, telling myself I'd reply in a minute. That familiar instinct kicked in. Take space. Regain control. Don't show too much need. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, my phone buzzed. Owen. Hey, did I say something wrong? There it was. The consequence I used to avoid by staying undefined. I typed back immediately. No, I'm sorry. I was in my head. A pause. Then, Owen, thank you for telling me. Next time, can you tell me while you're in it? I stared at the screen, feeling both exposed and oddly relieved. Me? Yeah, I'm trying to unlearn some stuff. Owen. I know. I see it. That mattered more than I expected. A few weeks later, I went to visit him for the first time since the move. 3 hours in the car gave me too much time to think. What if things felt off? What if distance had quietly changed something and we were just pretending it hadn't? When he opened the door to his new place, those fears evaporated. He looked like himself. Same crooked smile, same familiar warmth, but there was something steadier about him too. Like the move had given him confidence instead of taking it away. Hey, he said, pulling me into a hug that lasted a beat longer than usual. Hey, I replied, breathing him in like proof that this was real. That weekend wasn't perfect. We stepped on each other's routines. I felt out of place in his space. He caught me withdrawing once or twice, going quiet when I didn't know where I fit. Saturday night, we finally talked about it. I feel like a guest, I admitted, sitting on the edge of his bed. Like I don't know my role here. He nodded. I was worried you'd feel that way. You were? I asked. Yeah, he said. Because I don't want you visiting my life. I want you in it. Something in my chest loosened. What does that look like? I asked. Messy, he said with a small smile. Awkward sometimes, but shared. So the next day, we did mundane things. Grocery shopping. Laundry. I complained about the water pressure in his shower. He teased me about reorganizing his kitchen without asking. It felt normal. That night, lying next to him, I realized how much I'd changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but intentionally. I was still afraid sometimes, still unsure, but I wasn't running from those feelings anymore. On the drive home, I caught myself smiling for no reason. Clarity hadn't solved everything, but it had given me something I'd never had before, a way to face uncertainty without disappearing. I texted Owen when I got back. Me, I miss you already. A pause. Then, Owen, good, means it's working. I laughed out loud, alone in my car. Love without labels had once felt like freedom, but love with clarity? That felt like choosing to stay, again and again, even when it would be easier not to. The real test came when things stopped being dramatic. No distance milestones, no big conversations, just time. Weeks turned into months. Visits became routine instead of events. The novelty of making it work faded, replaced by something quieter, and somehow heavier. Not in a bad way, just real. That's when I noticed the shift in myself. I stopped bracing for the end. It wasn't conscious, I just didn't do it anymore. I didn't rehearse exit speeches in my head. Didn't interpret every disagreement as a warning sign. When Owen was quiet, I asked, instead of assuming. When I felt overwhelmed, I said so. Sometimes clumsily, sometimes late, but I said it. One night, during a call, he caught me mid-spiral. "You're doing that thing," he said gently. "What thing?" "Where you talk like you're already preparing for loss." I paused. "Am I?" "Yeah," he said. "Just a little." Old me would have deflected, made a joke, changed the subject. Instead, I sighed. I think part of me still believes that if I don't get too comfortable, it won't hurt as much if it ends. Owen didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Do you actually believe that works?" I thought about it. About all the half relationships, all the almosts, all the times I'd walked away intact but empty. "No," I said quietly, "not really." "Then maybe," he said, "comfort isn't the enemy. Avoidance is." That stuck. A few weeks later, he came back to my city for a conference. We didn't make it a big thing. No countdown, no dramatic reunion. He just showed up at my door with his backpack slung over one shoulder like he never left. That night, we lay on my couch, legs tangled, TV playing something neither of us was watching. "You feel different," he said. I turned to him. "Good different or bad different?" "Good," he said. "Present." I smiled, but my throat tightened a little. "I feel different too." "How?" "I don't feel like I'm negotiating with myself anymore," I admitted, "about whether I'm allowed to want this." He reached for my hand, thumb brushing over my knuckles. "You always were." "I know," I said. "I just didn't trust that wanting something didn't mean losing myself." We were quiet for a moment. "Do you miss the no-label version of us?" he asked, not accusing. Just curious. I thought about it honestly. "I miss how safe it felt," I said. "But I don't miss how lonely it was." He nodded. "That's fair." Later that night, half asleep, he murmured, "You know, clarity doesn't have to mean rigidity." I smiled into the dark. "You're really committed to that theme." He laughed softly. "Someone has to be." As he slept beside me, I realized something simple and profound. I wasn't less myself, because I'd chosen him clearly. I was more myself, because I wasn't hiding. Love without labels had once felt like freedom, because I didn't know how to stay. Love with clarity wasn't about certainty or guarantees. It was about standing in the uncertainty together and not pretending it didn't exist. The last shift didn't come with an announcement. No fight, no ultimatum, no big, cinematic moment where everything clicked into place. It came on a random Sunday morning. Owen was back in my city for the weekend. We were half asleep, tangled in sheets that smelled like detergent, and him, the light just starting to creep in through the blinds. He was scrolling on his phone. I was staring at the ceiling, letting my mind wander the way it does when I'm relaxed enough to be honest with myself. "I've been thinking about next year," he said casually. I turned my head toward him. "Dangerous opening line," he smiled. "I know, but hear me out." He put the phone down. "My lease is up next spring. I don't want to renew it automatically without talking to you." My chest tightened, not in panic, but in recognition. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm not asking you to move," he continued. "And I'm not asking to move back just because of us. I just want us to think about what we want intentionally. Together." That word again. Intentionally. A year ago, that conversation would have sent me spiraling. I would have nodded non-committally, cracked a joke, and spent the rest of the day internally calculating how to protect myself from expectations. But lying there with him, warm and steady beside me, I didn't feel trapped. I felt included. "I like that," I said, thinking about it together. He studied my face, like he was checking for hesitation. "No disappearing?" I smiled. "No disappearing." He leaned over and kissed my shoulder. Simple, unceremonious, real. Later that day, we took a walk through my neighborhood. Nothing romantic, no hand-holding montages or dramatic confessions. Just us, side by side, talking about dumb things and serious ones in the same breath. At one point, we passed a couple arguing quietly outside a cafe. The tension was familiar. I felt a flicker of something old in my chest. This is why you don't define things. But then Owen nudged me lightly with his elbow. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said honestly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how I used to think labels were the problem," I said. When, really, it was my fear of being known. He didn't say "I told you so." He just smiled. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake listening to his breathing, thinking about how far we'd come. Not in distance, but in choice. I used to believe love without labels was freedom. And in a way, it was freedom from accountability, from vulnerability, from staying when it got uncomfortable. But loving Owen taught me something different. Clarity isn't a cage. It's a commitment to honesty. To saying this matters even when you can't guarantee the outcome. To choosing someone not because it's easy, but because it's real. I don't know exactly what our future looks like. I still don't have every label figured out. I probably never will, but I know this. I don't need ambiguity to feel safe anymore. Because the bravest thing I've ever done wasn't refusing to define myself. It was letting someone see me clearly and staying anyway.